We are live here on Plus One EXP's Roll for Content channel. My name is Tony Vicenda. I am Chief Alchemist over at Plus One EXP, which is a weird little brand that multi-classes in tabletop game design, beard, and skincare alchemy. And of course, the Bardic College of Content Creation, our hope and desire is to help amazing designers who find great players to love their games, and amazing players to find great designers whose games they can love. We do that in a lot of different ways, but seriously, my favorite one is to sit down with the creators of those games and just talk to them about their experience of play, what went into the design process, and some of the things that they love in the RPG sphere. And so today we are sitting down with the designer of my most anticipated game of Zine Month, or my most anticipated project, I should say more specifically. It's Barkeep on the Borderland by Prismatic Wasteland. Pris, thanks for being here. Why don't you tell people who you are, what you do, where they can find you online, but also tell us a little bit about Barkeep.
Thanks, Tony. I'm Prismatic Wasteland of the blog of the same name. I'm a OSR or post-OSR blogger, and I'm currently kickstarting Barkeep on the Borderlands, which is a point crawl, pub crawl adventure. It's system neutral, so designed to fit pretty much any system, but kind of with D&D derived systems especially in mind. We have a lot of great kind of OSR minds who are going to be making bars for it, but the idea is basically that you and your party are traveling through this decadent large city, going from bar to bar, trying to find an antidote for an ailing king, or just brawling and flirting your way through the city. So that's kind of the short and sweet of it.
Love it. I'm super excited about it. Like I said, it was my most anticipated project. I've already backed, and I was joking around with you the other day about a couple different things before you launched, but one of them was I can't wait for the coaster stretch goal. I didn't have to wait for a coaster stretch goal because I could get coasters right off the bat, which I popped up on the screen next to us so people can see them. I am super excited about this. We're going to dive a little bit more into the project in just a little bit, but first, I want to talk about it's Zine Month. We've got a lot of different creators who are out there right now making projects. You're participating in Zine Month on Kickstarter, which is not a Kickstarter project. It's a grassroots effort across platforms. So one of the things I'm asking all my guests to do this month, who are all people who are creating for Zine Month for the most part, is to pick a few projects that they're really excited about so that we can take a look at them. So rather than dive straight into your stuff, we're going to talk about other people's stuff. Link Skywalker says, looks slick, too slick to be a zine. Well, Link, I don't want to argue about what a zine is or not, so we're not going to have that conversation. But Pris, why don't you tell me a little bit about some of your favorite projects? I'll put them up next to us as we're going. We can kind of walk through the Kickstarter pages, talk a little bit about what you like about them, what I like about them, and what kind of drew your eye to these projects. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Let's start with The Toxic Wood by Lazy Lich.
All right, let's do it. All right, so we got The Toxic Wood, which is currently funding. It was also one of my most anticipated projects. I'm a huge fan of this creator, Shane, who goes by Lazy Lich. It's an absolutely gorgeous game. I backed their project last year for Zine Quest. Tell me what you love about The Toxic Wood and about this creator.
The first thing that stands out is just Lich's art. It's always fantastic. It's both kind of beautiful and haunting, but it looks really nice on the page as well. And I think this is also an especially cool premise. I liked his previous two zines that are kind of form a trilogy with this one, which you can also get on the campaign. But the idea of a kind of toxic wood that's mutating monsters is like very appealing to me, somebody who's into kind of post-apocalyptic sort of media. It makes me think of like Nausicaa and Valley of the Wind almost. But just I love the idea of like a noxious wood that's sort of an enemy in and of itself. That's wonderful. But yeah, the art is really appealing. Just looking on the page is a delight.
Yeah, I missed their first one and I didn't get it last year, so I got to go back and pick that up with the first one. Yeah, everything about their projects always just I think totally sings, and I think it's just every single time they put one out, I think it looks better and better. Not just like the art style has always been amazing, but the layout I feel like in this one looks better than anyone that came out. They weren't bad before, but I just feel like it's been taken up a whole nother level on this one. But yeah, I think it's just absolutely mind-bogglingly beautiful. And I'm super excited to be able to pick up the past editions also. I'm also a big fan. Anytime somebody gives me the option to get a little bit of extra art in the game, whether it's prints or originals, like I'm a sucker for little bits of paper that my wife will get mad at me because they're laying around the house. But I'm a big fan of being able to pick up like prints, other pieces like that. So yeah, I think this tremendous project, like I said, one of my top anticipated ones. And they do just tremendous stuff with the orientation. And these are things that they're OSE compatible, which means you can drop them into pretty much any old school setting or use any old school system to walk through them. But man, just look at this. Look at these spreads. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's really gorgeous.
Awesome. Where do you want to go next?
Let's go next to Downtime in Zion by Ben Lawrence.
Yeah. The most scandalous of all projects in ZiMo. So through Ultans Door, we covered before. They're one of our kind of favorites in Zine Quest 3. We've played the third installation in Through Ultans Door with Ben on stream last year. Did a little review of it, so you can go check that out over on our channel. But Downtime in Zion is kind of like what you do in between sessions in the City of Dreams, or sorry, in the sewers below the City of Dreams. But maybe you can get up into the City of Dreams also too. For people who don't know, like one of my other things that I love about Ben is these are Ben's home games turned into zine form. Like Ben's such a great thinker. The prose is phenomenal. The concepts are really great, but Ben has been running a number of groups through Zion, the City of Dreams for a while now, and has enough content when we talked last year for like 14 of these. So I can only imagine it's gone further so far. So we're going to see a lot of Through Ultan's Door in the incoming years. What do you love about this project though?
I love that it's also, even if you have not for some reason backed Through Ultan's Door and his other stuff, it really is system agnostic and setting agnostic as well. Because these are, downtime is something that's much vaunted about D&D and OSR games, but it's kind of hard to do right. And a lot of systems will focus on, the combat or items or encumbrance, but they ignore downtime. And Ben has thought really deeply about downtime systems that are fun, that work together, and that engage players. A lot of these kind of original ideas he's developed in his like really wonderful blog, Marzoran's Garden. And so I'm just really delighted to have those ideas collected in kind of a physical form.
Yeah. I also say it's a small thing, but like the Dream Wizards and the new logo with Evelyn's art next to it as a little stamp is such a like an adorable little piece. We mentioned this was a scandalous project. Ben's tweets are now marked as objectionable content in some circles because there were some mole rat penises that Twitter didn't like. And
now on the page there's two different versions of the zine you can get.
Yeah. I just love leaning into that. Like Ben's layout, I think, is also a classic example of like it's really beautiful, broad stuff. Ben doesn't do it himself, but also Ben puts so much craft into each of these, and it's interesting to see him flex that with Evelyn's art this time. Traditionally, he's used a few other different artists who have this kind of wood block print style to it that I think sings really well, and I really love as the mode shifts, having the artist shift also too. I'm a huge fan of Evelyn's creations, both from an art standpoint as well as from a writing standpoint, but I like a different flavor that brings into the entire experience also too, and kind of the tonal shift that it suggests as well, which I think is just really clever and Ben puts a ton of thought into the project. So I'm a little surprised, though not entirely, that there were not more fully bundled sets with some of the older prints, but I know that Ben is planning on doing Through Ultan's Door 4 later on in the year, and so if you missed the earlier editions and want to get that will be coming later on this year. There are Dream Wizards in the game also too, so you're going to the City of Dream, Yohanan, and so there is a Dream Wizard classification and some other stuff that you can do that's very, very cool. I love. Do you want to look at Crush Depth or Electrum Archive next?
Let's go with Electrum Archive next.
Awesome. We got Electrum Archive. So, the first two were on Kickstarter. A lot of the response, and, we'll maybe talk about this a little bit for you, Pris, in a second. A lot of people shifted off Kickstarter because of the blockchain announcement, because of the movement of Zine Quest to another time of year, due to a lot of frustrations that people were having. And so we're seeing a lot more projects that we'll be reviewing this month that are not on Kickstarter, that are funding on another platform, itch.io being one of the primaries for that. And so the Electrum Archive is over on itch. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what attracted you to this project?
So yeah, this is one of the itch ones that that caught my eye immediately. I can't remember if it launched on the 1st of February or a little before, but it's been in the orbit for a while. But the first thing you see whenever you go on this itch page is that kind of gorgeous kind of project image with the city and the far with the almost human looking. I don't know if it's a building or a paralyzed god or something, but just really evokes kind of the weird fantasy. And that's what this is. It's very much in the vein of like Ultraviolet's Grasslands, which is one of my all-time favorite games. And so honestly, just something I can steal stuff from and put in a weird post-apocalyptic game is always an instant back for me. But the art is wonderful. The layout looks really, really nice. So yeah, everything about this looks like a really great project.
Yeah, and I love this. They've got the free playtest rules that you can get to kind of check out some of the content that's in it. I'm, as somebody who is also a big fan of like stripping stuff out, pulling stuff off, I'm really excited by the amount of science fantasy stuff that we're seeing come out this ZiMo. Stuff that leans into that higher end of fantasy where there's a little bit of tech or that fantastic level of sci-fi. Doing Down We Go over the last year, now working on Through the Void, I'm always looking for stuff that I can kind of cross over both of the two systems I'm mostly playtesting and running stuff in right now. And so I think this one almost made my top 10 list as well. It's just a really gorgeous piece, but I want to get it both to check out the system that's in it, but also to just be able to pull things from. And I'm really hoping that we're going to see Electrum Archive become maybe a series by a mill, because I would love to see. One of the things I love about zines that I think Ben's work does, or the project we're about to talk about with Crush Depth do, is create a little bit more serialized content. Even when things are fully standalone, building them in a similar vein, I think, is a really great part about releasing zines that a bigger book doesn't get you to do the ability to do. Mazes did a really good job of that over the last few years as a system. They released as a set of zines over 2 years and then eventually released a hardback bound set of all of that content together once people had gotten excited about the system. And so I'm hoping that Electrum Archive is kind of the first, maybe in some, and then there's some follow-up pieces to it that Emil does as well. But
yeah, I agree. That would be really awesome.
Let's look at Crush Depth. Before we swing back over it. By the way, I've been dropping the links to all these in the chat. I will update the descriptions of these later on YouTube if you're watching later, to make sure they're down in the chat as well. But tell us a little bit about Crush Depth Apparition.
So Crush Depth, I think this came out maybe just yesterday, but
yeah,
it is the third in a trilogy of vaunted Zine Quest, formerly Zine Quest projects. A lot of people, I'm sure, have heard of You Got a Job on the Garbage Barge.
Vampire Cruise is right there.
yeah. And Vampire Cruise is really beautiful as well. So both of those were so good that even before I really looked at the page, I was excited by it. But each one takes a very kind of different flavor and approach. And this one is sort of a survival horror on a submarine, which is the spookiest of all types of boats because you're underwater. So it looks great. She makes really great zines, so this was another kind of instant back for me.
Yeah. The other great thing about this one is it's being hosted over on the Nerve side. If anybody's not familiar with Nerves, we've got Amanda coming on next Wednesday, so you're going to get to hear about Amanda's favorite projects. You'll get to hear more about this one if you want to. We're also going to have Bats on sometime next week. Bats is the person who's hosting the project over on their site, which is funding completely on their website. So basically, if the funds aren't fully raised by the end of the month, everybody gets reimbursed. Otherwise, it goes to print. Currently, it's sitting at like 54% funded, but 100% something that I would encourage people to go back. This was again one of my top anticipated zines. It was in my top 3, and I'm super excited. I love Amanda for a lot of the same reason, but the art on all of Amanda's projects is absolutely stunning to me. My only part I was upset about in this one, and I'm just going to reach out to Amanda individually and be like, how much extra do I have to pay you for some original art? Vampire Cruise had the original art that she had done. She had done them on like individual index cards and then scanned them in. So you were able to get at a certain level like one of the original pieces of art in the book. So I'm just going to reach out and be like, Amanda, how much do I have to pay you for a piece of Crush Depth Apparition art? Because I desperately want some. But just gorgeous creation. Amanda also did a workshop on kind of introing and doing your own art or working with artists. That's over on our channel also a few weeks ago as part of ZiMo Prep. So go check out any and all of these creators. But again, that may not be why you came here today. Viewer, you may have come here today to actually hear about Pris and about Barkeep. So let's talk a little bit more about your project and a little bit about who you are. How did you get started? This is kind of the cliche question, but how did you get kind of started playing role-playing games?
In terms of getting started playing role-playing games, it's about a decade ago. I matriculated into university, and while there, I was in an honors dorm, so no shortage of nerds. And a person tried to introduce me to Magic the Gathering, didn't take, but then also tried to introduce me to D&D, and that did take. We ended up playing a campaign that started, basically the first week of freshman year into my senior year, and I've played a lot since then. So that's sort of the origin. That was back in 3.5, whenever that was popular. I think it was actually 4E era, though.
I was say that sounds like 4E era, and that was 100% going to be my question. Were you playing 3.5 or were you playing 4th edition? I think either way is great. Both are systems I would rather play over some other editions of Dungeons and Dragons. But so you got started playing then, like you also have kind of stepped in a lot of ways into, like you said, the OSR, the kind of post OSR conversations. Tell me a little bit about shifting over from Dungeons and Dragons into more of an OSR space. Is that something that happened quickly, happened over time, was relatively recent? What got you starting to look at kind of some of the OSR realities and scene?
Yeah, it wasn't particularly gradual. I was playing, D&D, be it 3.5, 4th edition or 5th edition for, a number of maybe 8 or so years. And then something happened in 2020 that confined us all to our homes, which meant I had less time to go to my weekly game sessions and more time to kind of just, Google and read about games online. And through that, I found not only the vibrant, though less vibrant now than it used to be, blogging scene behind the OSR. And what really kind of the spark that sort of lit the fuse was on May Day for Workers' Day. Luka Rejic put out like a free version of UVG. I don't know how, I can't remember how I saw it, but I saw that, downloaded it, and was like, I have to get everything this guy's done. I did that, and I started looking at other. He mentioned Gus L as like an influence, and I started looking through Gus's L's old blogs.
I recently caught up on all of my Lucas stuff. I had everything else, but these ones I had not picked up yet. So I'm a big fan.
Both really good. Yeah. I like Medicine. It came out a little, or I got it a little after Halloween this year, but next Halloween I'm gonna have to run it.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the origin. And I started making my game, and towards the end of 2020, in December, I started a blog, which is a weird thing to do in 2020, but I don't really look back.
Awesome. Well, like it's really interesting. Like I do feel like a lot of the world is like, hey, we're going to shift over to video content. Like obviously we create video content or short form content, or like, hey, we're just going to post pictures, or there's a lot of people even in the OSR scene who do like layout look throughs. I'm a big fan of reading blogs. I am not a big fan of writing and editing my own text, and so which I have to do to shoot videos anyways. So like, ha ha ha. But nobody else has to read it besides me, so it doesn't matter. I do feel like it is something that is more prominent in OSR, or when we say that, like old school, Renaissance, or revival is what those three letters mean. What those words represent can be very variable to any individual, and I'd love to hear kind of your take on that in just a second. But I do feel like blogging is something we've seen a lot more success within that context, especially coming out of like the Google Plus where people were doing a lot of text writing. We had the Forge, we had like a lot of these other things that even if they weren't OSR were being written down and talked out. And now discourse has moved, and dialogue have moved into more of a conversational format, but that means we get less documentation. And so I really appreciate that you were like, I'm going to start a blog, because blogs, you can consume them in a very, very different way. They're usually far more accessible for people. And it also lets you lay out a way of thinking that a lot of other types of content creation don't do. And so like, I'm grateful either way. And you are part of a cadre of people who do blogging that I really, really love. A lot of whom are connected through kind of bones of contention, but even outside of that, a lot of people you have working on your project are people who I love reading what they write, both their games as well as their blog content. So again, I'm super grateful for that. So that kind of got you into OSR, but let's talk about that specifically. You kind of talked about your maybe OSR, maybe post OSR for you. And I think this is, there's no desire for me largely to debate this with anybody. I just love hearing people articulate, like, what does OSR mean for you? What does post OSR mean for you? What are some of those conversations you think are actually important or defining factors for some of that?
Yeah, I love to debate this as well. Sometimes and sometimes I don't. But so whenever I say OSR, I look to Retired Adventurer. Speaking of blogs, his blog has a post called Six Cultures of Play, which I think from any play culture, whether or not you're OSR, a story gamer, kind of if you just play 5e, it's a good article to read just to see how the other people run their games, because it kind of talks about all these different play cultures that are different, not just in the games they play, but also kind of in their normative behaviors, in the channels of communication, and what sets OSR apart from similar types of play like classic style play is the real focus on player agency, on the things that Chris McDowell calls information, choice, impact. So just kind of really putting power to the players and letting them make decisions that impact the world.
Yeah, no, and I think it's really interesting. I think if you look back at a lot of classic play, especially if you look back even kind of to before Dungeons and Dragons was codified and in print, and people were really, because a lot of people may not know this, like there were people who were playing tabletop role-playing games before Dungeons and Dragons was in print. Dungeons and Dragons was really more of a synthesis and cohesion of a lot of the play culture that grew out of a region of the country, published into a format that anybody could access as long as you could figure out how to get it to you. The reality is there was a lot of player agency in those earliest stages of classic play that I feel like got lost in later stages of classic and in traditional playing, where the GM became more of an authoritative and adversarial figure a lot of the time. And if you look back even at some of the really fraught content that came out of like some of those early days and some of the real issues in it, there was a lot of player collaboration in the narration and the building of the world that I think OSR games did a really phenomenal job of recapturing and bringing back to the table. They're hugely influential in my design and a lot of other people's. And I think a lot of that oftentimes comes through story game influence. So those cultures of play are constantly overlapping each other, engaging with each other. There's a couple pieces about that article I don't like, but one of the things I do love is, and one of the reasons I use it as an example and as common language is I think it's good, is the focus on these are more about styles of play than they are about inherent games. So I will have people show up to an OSR game who have only played a trad style game and not understand why what they're doing is not successful, or show up to a story game with a very classic style of play and not understand why this isn't jiving with them or why what they're doing isn't working quite as well. Same thing for story gamers stepping into those. Though I do find story gamers and OSR gamers are actually really good at stepping into those other ones, and it's more so confusing for the GM. Like, why am I not able to ever make this person roll a dice? And it's like, well, they're just creatively approaching every single problem and trying to talk through it, which may not be what you want as a GM. It may not be what your table wants. It's reason it's good to have those conversations, but they may not be triggering things that would normally be a part of it. And I think it's always so interesting to see again what people's takes on each of those are. So you liked that player agency, that kind of that some of those other pieces. How has that influenced the design work that you do and the way that you're pursuing this? Because Barkeep on the Borderland is your first print project, but you are actually working towards kind of long-term your own system and articulation. You've done other small releases before too. Tell us a little bit about how that's influenced the way that you design.
So the way that kind of influences me is, especially with adventure writing, so for instance, Barkeep, is I write problems, but I do not write solutions. One of my pet peeves in adventures is whenever an adventurer will say, if they wash their hands in the fountain, it'll cause X effect. It's like, but why would they wash their hands in the fountain? Why is that the solution? So I would rather plant information. If you want the players to do something, signpost that. If you want them to explore the bookshelf or hidden lever that opens a secret door, describe the scuff marks. But I try not to pigeonhole any particular solution or even require a certain set of solutions, because it's sort of like we were saying with story gamers and OSR people not having that much, different philosophies. I really like emergent narrative, and that's kind of what I'm looking for, both in my games, my adventures, and also in the systems I design. I want to design them to create that emergent narrative.
Yeah. Well, it's like one of the reasons, like you mentioned UVG, like my first time going through the Grasslands was using Troika. And Troika is so good as a system about saying, look, whatever skills your players have and whatever weird things they came into this setting with, those are the things that inherently are going to matter. And then taking a place like the Grasslands, which is, there's a lot of things that are very detailed about it and some things that are very non-detailed about it, and meshing those kind of two things together, where you've got, here's some concrete anchors, and then here's the open emergent narrative that the players are building around what they can do, which is very diverse, is such a fun place to play around and experiment. And you see it in, and I think OSR design more than you see it in any other place. Like, and it is my favorite thing to do around a table, is to let me as a GM be equally surprised as a player about the way things unfold, because even though I may have some anchors and some hooks, they also do, and how those things hit each other is really where we're going to see things emerge. I don't necessarily have an idea before that point on exactly what that's going to look like, and the more a system leans into that, the more excited I get. Again, it's one of the reasons why, like in addition to, I love the art, I love the team, I love all the stuff that you've put out so far that I've seen. I enjoy the blog. The concept of taking something like, hey, like Keep on the Borderland classic module, we all know it, we see a reference here, but then saying like, we're going to tell a different story within this space about a pub crawl, like that to me is far more exciting than saying here's a bunch of locations you can explore, so much as I get an instant sense of some of the things this adventure is going to be about, while having no idea about the rest of it. So I know we talked a little bit about it at the beginning, but let's talk about Barkeep on the Borderlands specifically. Tell us again kind of what it is, but let's also start to talk a little bit about, like, what are some of the things that you've built into this that help that emergent narrative kind of start to come to the fore?
Right. So it's a pub crawl adventure, which is a location-based adventure where your dungeon is the streets of the Keep. And yeah, you mentioned that it's related to the classic Keep on the Borderlands module. And it's sort of, I think of it as like a pseudo sequel. It takes place 200 years after a potential ending of the Keep on the Borderlands, where the Keep has driven out or usurped the territory of all the monsters and kind of built their own larger city on top of that space. And since then has become kind of this decadent place. They celebrate the time that they got rid of the Caves of Chaos by celebrating every year the Raves of Chaos, which is a week-long festival. And it gives me a reason to have the guards, the police, be not very powerful. So basically this is a time whenever culturally the Keep doesn't enforce their laws, and it's kind of a lawless sort of Mardi Gras vibe. And that's why the centrality of the pub crawl happens. So kind of similar to setting up problems and not solutions, I open with a problem, which is that the monarch of this keep has been poisoned. They don't know by who, and the antidote has been shipped somewhere amongst the bars. And I'm going to have a timeline for the GMs to kind of be able to track, if the players aren't doing something, stuff still happens. So the antidote is getting moved. Other factions are kind of having spy versus spy like antics as they try to, recapture the antidote, and at the same time the players are. And so it's a very moving and vibrant world and system as the players explore. But the way that I've designed it to have kind of emergent narratives and not just dictate a story is really what I think is most interesting about my kind of side of the post OSR ideas, is the idea of procedure of structured play. So I have exploration turns for the pub crawl, where every turn, the GM rolls a event dice to see what happens as the players, flirt or throw somebody out a bar window. And that roll might determine, are people starting to get drunk? Does time pass? Does a encounter happen? And there are keyed sort of random encounters both inside each bar and on the way to and from each bar. So there's a lot that can happen. And it's fairly densely packed in 52 pages. But it has all of that kind of procedure, all the rules you could need for determining if characters are drunk, and all you can eat for 20 different bars and taverns.
And I'm going to click on the link on the thing to rules for drinking and inebriation. Let's talk about that for a second. Not because I have specific concerns, because I think you'll have good answers for this. Two things. One, like there's a conceit in this that there's going to be the option for alcohol consumption, which is, I think, for a lot of people, if they're sitting down to play a traditional or classic style or OSR game, alcohol consumption might happen at some point in time, both in the game or around the table potentially. But you've worked that into play. I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like I said, I know there's an article about it, but also kind of, is there a way you touch on having conversations with players who may have an issue with alcohol consumption?
Yeah, so the rules that you're talking about are on my blog are mostly about not the players drinking, but the characters drinking. We are thinking about having kind of like some drinking rules or something that's tied to the adventure, but I'm wanting to have that as separate from the module as possible. If I were to add it, it would be maybe as like a bookmark, kind of as something to know you can totally remove it and the adventure still stands. Nobody at the table needs to drink, and there should be no pressure to do that. If you want to, that's a way to kind of have the type of fun you want. But the rules that I present there really paint a light that I think would be something that people who don't drink recognize. Because what I say in that article is a lot of rules you see for, if you Google D&D 5th edition drinking rules, it's like how it's going to impair your movement speed or how it impacts your attack rolls, which to me doesn't really ring true to the experience. It does have, an impact on people's cognitive ability, but the thing that it forgets is that there is a social pressure a lot of times, especially, if these characters are in the keep during this Mardi Gras-like time and they're in bars, there's a social pressure and a social expectation to drink. I quoted one recent article from The Atlantic that says that alcohol is the only drug that you have to explain people, I don't want to do this. And that's true for a lot of people who, either they can't drink because they have Asian flush, or maybe they are in recovery, or maybe they just don't want to. A lot of times you have to be like, no, I'm not doing this. And so that social pressure is kind of tied into the system that I have, because if you're going through the bar crawl and you aren't, your character's not drinking, people might be more likely to be suspicious because they're letting down their social guard. But it's kind of another choice that characters are able to make, because if I have incentives both to drink and not to drink, then that gives people a choice. Do they want to keep their wits about them, even though it might make people be suspicious, or let people's guard down, but at the same time potentially impair their own cognitive reasoning abilities at the characters. That's kind of how I set it up.
And that is actually presenting real player facing choice. It's not, if you drink, bad things happen. It's whatever choice you make, there are going to be consequences, and you as a player are going to choose how you navigate that. And bringing that social aspect in and acknowledging that, like I said, there's a lot of realities in which that is a responsible way to approach, like the most responsible way to approach this. Having like, my background is in church work, and it would always be really interesting when ever we would host an event, sometimes at our house, people would be like, you could tell people who would walk in and be like, obviously there's not going to be alcohol in here. And then they would look at me with a beer in my hand and be like, wait, where do I get one of those? I'd be like, they're in the garage. I'm a big fan of moderation, responsibility, having options for people in real life. And I do love that in a game also, but I love seeing the mechanized reality that doesn't say you have to do this, or this one's obviously way better, but saying, whichever way you choose to engage in this, it's going to be a choice that you can make. And even going back to player solutions, are there ways that you thread the needle on those? Do you appear to be drinking, but you're actually not in some way, shape, or form? How are you choosing to thread this is a very great way to open that up to player facing conversations around the conceit of the adventure. I want to talk a little bit about, by the way, I did mention them earlier. There are 4 coasters that you can get as part of this. Also, too, there's some cool map add-ons. I do want to find out a little bit more about some of the locations, but I want to talk about the team specifically first. So you have brought in an absolute hit list of some of my favorite people to work on this. People we collaborated with on Down We Go, people we have on our list to collaborate with in the future. But everybody who you're working with is a name that I recognized, loved, and was super excited to see attached to the project. So tell us a little bit about, as you call them, the Jolly Crew for this project.
I call them the Jolly Crew because that's in the module itself. whenever I want to refer to the PCs, that's usually how I'm doing it. But yeah, this group of people are all, really rock stars in their own right. And I believe every single one of them is a blogger, and to various degrees. Some of them will post every week, and some of them will post every blue moon. But all of them are really good thinkers in either the OSR or the post OSR, or even some of them are a kind of story game adjacent as well. And they also have just a diverse set of experiences towards taverns. So like I know that I grew up, or whenever I was of an age that it's normal to drink, I was in a very drinking heavy town with a lot of bars, and so it's very normal to me. But we have a couple people on this list who, maybe they can count on their one hand how many times they've been to a bar. So they have a different relationship with these things. Each person is bringing their own experiences, and I think that's just going to lead to a lot more uniqueness in the bars. And I think it also will just be cool to have different, each bar spread just looks entirely different and kind of exudes the different styles that these different people have.
I love it. Talk to us a little bit more about the actual, so it's a 52-page zine. Like I said, you have the option also to add on kind of a poster which has some of the locations on it, as well as these coasters. Tell us a little bit about the zine itself, kind of what we can expect as far as locations, and some of the extras you're kind of adding in there for the experience.
Right. So the zine itself is going to be very nice for anybody who's ever had a LFOSR's zines before. He does like top-notch work. I have several, and each one was just so great that whenever I was planning this, I had to reach out and was like, hey, can we work together on this? So it's going to look really nice. But in terms of what's in the zine, each bar is going to be its own spread, which I think is going to make it easier for people who don't want to use this as an adventure and just want to use it as a repertoire of taverns they can just pull into any game. You open a spread, and that's all you need. You don't have to turn to other pages. You just look at that. And on each page is going to be, some level of color illustrations. As for the add-ons, you have the option to add on either or both a poster or a set of coasters. Now, the poster art that is on there is just basically a tiny corner of what the poster will eventually be. It shows just 3 of the bar locations. The reason it's only a corner is because we had all these guest writers, and I wanted to be able to incorporate, the bars that they develop. And I think the final product is going to look really wonderful. For instance, MV, who is a guest writer that we unlocked yesterday, they're planning a airship bar.
Of
so
course.
Imagine an airship hovering over the map. I think that's going to look really cool. And then the final thing is the coasters that Sam Amelli drew the art for, and those are logos for 4 of the bars that I've designed. And each one they're super unique, and I think they look really nice together. And hopefully people are into them. Otherwise, I'm going to have a big box of coasters in my house forever.
I have ordered coasters before, and let me tell you this: even when people are into them, you're gonna have a big box of coasters in your house for a while. But here's the thing: if you get them double-sided and you just print the information on the back, every convention you go to for the next 10 years, you're just going to be able to slide those. It was really funny. I remember when I wanted to get coasters printed for a project at one point in time, telling one of my business partners at the time, yeah, it'll be really cool that we can kind of just seed them out at places when we go out. And they were like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then they came up to visit me in Seattle, where I lived at the time. And then we went out to a bar, and there were just stacks of coasters from places. I was like, yeah, I would just be sliding these in here as little hidden nuggets to see who discovered them. And I don't care if nobody does. It's just a cool thing to be able to have. But being able to go to a convention and go to the random place and just kind of slide them into and underneath people's drinks, I think is 100% a good long-term marketing plan, even if you don't get through all of them. But I hope you do. I 100% backed at the level to get both of those things for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. Both, I'm very excited about the project, but also I am very much in love with all the people who you have created on this project. LFOSR does tremendous work as far as the zine goes, and I know the other physical items will be kind of equally beautiful to those pieces. So we talked a little bit about the fact that you're unlocking writers. Currently, you guys are sitting at a little bit right under $9,000 as far as funding goes. You've got kind of stretch goals up until about $15,000. What are some of the things you're really looking forward to potentially unlocking as you guys keep on going?
So yeah, the 4 remaining stretch goals we have. 3 of those are additional contributors. One is Ann Hunter of DIY and Dragons. That's one of the all-time great, DIY OSR blogs. She is going to write a bar. Ben Lawrence, who we mentioned earlier, his zine is currently funding. He's going to write a bar as the next one for whenever we hit 10,000. At 12,000, that's that issue of 1,000 Islands.
So excited for that one.
Yeah, he's amazing, and I'm really excited to see what he puts into it, because 1,000 Islands are very much, in terms of writing a system neutral adventure, that's kind of the gold standard, because that's something you can pull and you can just read as like fiction, but you can also drop it easily into any system. So he's kind of the gold standard. And our final one at 15,000 is just a 10% pay bump for all contributors, because at that point, whenever we get that much, we want to share it with everybody on the project.
I'm a huge fan of having benchmarkers for increasing pay for contributors. It's something that we have a really strong commitment to for our project. So I was really excited to kind of see that worked in. Like we said, this is your first time crowdfunding a project. What are some of the lessons that you're kind of learning along the way? What's something that, if you had the ability to tell yourself 6 or 8 months ago, hey, plan out for this, what would you have told yourself?
Oh man, it's hard to say like this soon into it, because I'm just 2 days in. There are definitely things that I did unintentionally that I think I did right, and one of those was having the pre-launch page early. So I had the pre-launch page probably set up maybe mid-January, and it's really no downside to it. People start following it as you build the page out. So that was, I think, it wasn't a strategy on my part, but I kind of blundered into something that seems to have worked really well. Another thing that I think that is going to pay off is just the fact that I have a lot of art in here, which is tough to do, and which is a downside to doing any sort of crowdfunding project. You have to eat into a lot of sunk costs, but I think that the page looks good. And I think people, we were talking earlier, I believe, off stream, talking about what people kind of really look at whenever they look at the crowdfunding or Kickstarter sites. And the thing that's easily digestible is art. Cover art, the stuff by Sam O'Malley, easily it pays for itself, because it's so gorgeous, and that's the thing that really attracts people. You can have the best writing in the world, but you need something to complement that, and art is just as much of a part of design, I think, as the rules or the setting.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like I said, I think it looks tremendous. I think the more you can show people, the more helpful it is to help create confidence in that. And yeah, I always tell people, they're like, how far in advance should I have my page ready to follow? And I know people who've had Kickstarter pages up like 6 months in advance and just been building that entire time in the board game sphere. In RPGs, we typically see like a month or two. And I think that's really an ideal time to be like, hey, you're excited enough to remember this when it launches, but not so far in advance that you're like, I don't know what you're talking about, whatever it gets there. If you can hit that almost a month out, which is where you were, I think you can do a lot in that space and time. When you're a week out, you're going to get a lot of friend likes and but you're not necessarily going to hit the people who are super interested in backing right away, which is huge. I can't wait to see, like I said, I really would love to see if this project get up into like that 30K range, and I think it certainly potentially can. Even if it doesn't, I'm so glad that you were able to fund quickly, because there's only one thing worse than not funding, and that's funding at the last minute. It's not bad. It's still good that you get to get it done and get to put it out there. But oftentimes the amount of stress you have to incur as you're going through that process can really wreak havoc on people. So I'm super glad that you had a lot of early success. And I know there's a ton of people who are still excited to back this and just haven't had the opportunity to yet. If you're watching right now, you can go to ttrpg.link /barkeepks. It's down below. It was down below our faces. It's somewhere. I'll drop it in the chat also too, and it's in the description of this video. If you're watching later, I am so glad you were able to come in today. You're able to make it out. I'm excited about a lot of the same projects that you are, and again, about Barkeep as well. So if people want to follow the rest of your work, what's one of the best places for them to look?
The best place for them to look would be prismaticwasteland.com. It has a link up at the top, or if you're on a phone, at the little hamburger button, that'll take you to the Kickstarter page. It'll show you all my blog posts where I talk about my various stuff coming up, and that's the best place. The second best place would be Twitter. I'm at Prismatic Wastes with an S at the end. on Twitter, and I post too much there probably. So you can go follow me on there as well.
Awesome. And if you're just joining us today, we'd love to have you come back. Again, we've got basically every day this week, we've got something related to Zine Month or a great, amazing indie RPG that's launching tomorrow. We are going to be playing with Cesar. I Guess This Is It, which is a 2-person, 18-card role-playing game by Button Shy Games. It's the first RPG they're putting out in a series. I'm super excited to see Button Shy Games step into RPGs. I'm a huge fan of a lot of the other 18-card pocket games they make. I Guess This Is It as an RPG for 2 players about the final goodbye between 2 people. Maybe you were business partners. Maybe you're on a spaceship trying to stop the sun from exploding and you failed horribly. Whatever it is, it's your last conversation you're going to have together. And in just a few minutes, you have to figure out what you want to express and what you're going to leave unsaid. It's going to be about an hour of play. But it's the only time anybody's seen this game played in public. I'm super excited to have it here on the stream. Additionally, on Saturday, we are going to be playing Nuclear Obelisk's 13 Hunters, which is a project we are co-publishing with Nuclear Obelisk as part of ZiMo. It's the only ZiMo project that you can find on GameFound if you go to ttrpg.link /13 Hunters, /13H. It'll take you right there. Would love to have your support there. We're going to be funding through the rest of the month and into early March, but we would love to have your support early and to check it out. Real Meat Castle just joined us and is bummed because they didn't. But Real Meat Castle is going to be playing 13 Hunters with us on Saturday. We're gonna throw some bounty hunters after a bunch of people using Through the Void and see how it handles all of these amazing hunters. Additionally, we've got some more interviews, other things like that happening later on this week. If anybody has any questions, Real Meat Castle or anybody else who's watching that you want to drop in, go ahead and drop them in the chat. We'll talk about those real quickly, though. I do know Pris needs to get on to the next thing they have in the day. Right now, I want to just encourage you, if you haven't gone to zinemonth.com, go check out the projects there. Last year during Zine Quest, we did something called $28, 28 days, and I totally forgot about it this year, but realize that supporting any of these games at any level that you can is always appreciated. It does a number of different things, but it helps notify other people that the game exists. It helps support them on whatever platform they are, get a little bit higher up in the algorithm, and especially if you share it with other people, it can be a tremendous boon. If you can't afford even $1, that's fine too. I would say if you see these games, you like these games, go share them on social media or share them with somebody who you might know can support them. If you have a GM who's just got deep pockets, be like, hey, you should get all these things. We should use all these things. Let's do a point crawl across the borderland. Those are all great ways you can support these creators. Again, we'll have links to all the different things we talked about on the YouTube video for this. If you're watching later, you can just click over onto that. Again, Pris, thanks so much for being here today. This has been Prestige Class with Prismatic Wastelands, and class is dismissed.